standouts like Darian Mensah, Mark Fletcher Jr., and Malachi Toney to perform, but you also need your sleepers to step up.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put the same work into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in that work, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. On this loaded episode, we'll talk latest 2027 recruiting rumors and insights, recruiting and transfer portal. We'll talk Darian Mensah and the fit. Not only the football fit, but the cultural fit at Miami. And yeah, we'll talk standouts and sleepers because you think about the season that Miami just had. And, of course, in 2026, we would like to see them finish the job. You get all the way to the national championship game this year. You go up against an obviously really good Indiana team that finished a perfect season. But Miami was close. Miami was a final drive away from possibly winning the national title. And in order to get there, you had your standouts step up throughout the year. Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor were as good as advertised, if not better. Francis Malinois, as good or better than advertised. Carson Beck, I thought better than advertised this past year at quarterback. But you also had sleepers step up. Jacoby Thomas, I don't think anyone expected Jacoby Thomas to have the year he had. I was talking with the host of Locked On Vols yesterday, and Tennessee fans were very surprised. Keontae Scott, the way he performed, Auburn fans didn't see that coming. Right? I mean, obviously, you wouldn't consider Malachi Toney to be a sleeper, but he was a true freshman last year. I don't think anyone imagined the type of impact he would have year one. So let's talk standouts and sleepers for the upcoming 2026 season as we get closer to spring football, folks. Because, at every position group, you have a standout or two who needs to be extraordinary this year. But there's also the possibility of a player you don't expect stepping forward to play a major role. We'll start at running back for Miami. Now, I wanted to make it easy and start with arguably the most loaded position because, the Hurricanes have a 5 to 6 man deep rotation there. We all know who the superstar is. Mark Fletcher, the guy who took over in the playoffs last year with over 500 rushing yards. Mark Fletcher was a big reason why Miami was able to get all the way to the national championship game. He's back for his senior season, and he's going to be the alpha of that running back room. So he's the superstar. There's no question. He's the standout. I would say the sleeper in the running back room, and there's a few different directions you could go in here, but I'm going to go with Jordan Lyle, who had the breakout true freshman year in 24, had a very quiet, virtually silent year outside of a touchdown and some good carries against Stanford. Jordan Lyle, who was injured at the start of 2025, didn't play a whole lot, kind of lost his spot to Gerard Pringle. But Lyle's back. That was one of the bigger surprises, that he never entered the transfer portal. And we know what Jordan Lyle is capable of if he stays healthy and gets his opportunity. So I'm going to say Jordan Lyle is like the wild card of that running back room. Because we have a good idea at this point what Gerard Pringle brings to the table. We have a good idea what Marty Brown brings to the table, especially at short yardage, red zone situations. Brown's going to play a big role. But Jordan Lyle, he's sort of that joker card, that ace up your sleeve heading into the 2026 season. I'm going to say he's the wild card this year. Wide receiver or receiver in general, Malachi Toney, that's obviously your standout, and you have multiple standouts there. I think you would put Cooper Barkate in that category as well. But for the sleeper, we've had the last several years, we've seen, Malachi being the top example of that, freshman step up and play roles in the receiving room. I'm going to go with Somourian Wingo, true freshman early enrollee right now out of St. Augustine. Wingo is someone, again, I keep hearing how well he performed in practice, in the playoff game practices, running the scout team, that he was really wowing Kevin Beard and the other players and coaches at Miami. So I'm going to say Somourian Wingo is someone that, even as a true freshman in one of the deepest position groups in the country, that is Miami's wide receiver room, Somourian Wingo is going to find a way to step out as a sleeper. Now, tight end. I guess with tight end, we're not even sure who the standout is at this point, right? Because we were all expecting Elijah Lofton to be the standout last year, and he had an up and down year. Wasn't nearly as involved in the passing game as we thought. You know, we had Alex Bauman was the primary starter at tight end and, was a good blocker, but had some inconsistencies as a receiver. So, Bauman is out of eligibility. So I'm just going to say Elijah Lofton, he's the most known commodity and he's the standout. He might also be the sleeper. I think for this position group, the standout and sleeper might be the same guy, but I'm also going to throw some love to Luka Gilbert. I know I could have gone Gavin Mueller as well. Everyone's getting excited for that picture he posted where he's like a statue carved out of stone. He's in such great shape. But as a true freshman, the tight end position can be a little difficult to get consistent playing time. So 6'7" Luka Gilbert heading into his sophomore year. I think that's the guy you'd probably say is the sleeper. But I think the tight end room, that's a position group that should have a chip on their shoulder this year. Maybe the entire room is full of sleepers, but there's a huge opportunity this coming season for Elijah Lofton to be the full-time starter there, potentially to step up and have a bounce-back year, because he showed a lot of promise his true freshman year. Did some good things this past year. The catch that he made where he got lit up and injured against Ole Miss for a first down was huge, but we need to see more from that position group. Offensive line. There's a lot of new faces there. For offensive line, I'm going to say the standout is the guy on Miami's O-line who has the most starts, and that's Matthew McCoy, who's got 39 career starts at Miami. He could end up being either the starting left guard or the starting left tackle, but we know Matthew McCoy's going to be a starter, so I'm going to say he's going to be the standout. In terms of the sleeper or sleepers, I'm going to look at a couple of redshirt freshmen who are going to have like their first year, I think, as full-time contributors. S.J. Alofa-Tuli and Max Buchanan, right? I think Buchanan can compete for a starting guard job, and S.J. is obviously going to compete for the starting center job this year. So that's a couple of young offensive linemen that I keep hearing really good feedback on that I'm going to look at as potentially being sleepers to really step up, and at least one of them is going to have a chance to crack the starting lineup this coming year. Quarterback, standout, Darian Mensah. Easy one. That's why I saved that one for last on the offense. He's going to be your QB1 this year. And boy, Darian Mensah comes in with the expectations to basically, remind us of what someone in that offense in 2024 did, right? Someone who took his stock to number 1 overall draft pick. Mensah and Cam Ward are not the same. They are different quarterbacks, but I think they have similar traits in certain ways and similar potential. So I think Darian Mensah, combining his ability and accuracy to attack down the field, his quick release to also play the short game, which Carson Beck excelled in, and his mobility and his escapability to extend plays makes Darian Mensah such a dynamic fit in Miami's offense. He's obviously the standout. And I'm going to say for the sleeper, I could have gone a couple different ways on this, obviously, because Miami has 3 backup quarterbacks this coming season. But I'm going to say, to me, the guy who's probably closest to becoming the heir apparent after Mensah likely goes to the NFL a year from now, I'm going to say Luke Nickel, right? That I'm going to assume, we'll revisit this after spring football, but I'm going to assume that Luke Nickel is going to be the number 2 quarterback this season, which means when you have that extra playing time, hopefully Miami has some blowout wins and you can bring the backups in, that Luke Nickel is going to get those backup minutes the way Emory Williams did this past year and maybe more of them. And we're going to have the opportunity to really see if Luke Nickel looks like a guy who can be the 2027 starting quarterback. So I'm going to say he is the sleeper. We'll talk about the defense on the other side. And, man, some of these are going to surprise you. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, it is the last call for football on FanDuel. One last Sunday, one last kickoff, one final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, you're riding with the underdog, do you like the Seahawks, do you like the Patriots, or you're building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for, and I love the Super Bowl props. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season's over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. And if you're an everydayer and you want to make it official, join the Everydayer Club. Click the link in the show notes below or go to lockedoncanes.supercast.com. Make sure you sign up for that all-access tier, because you get exclusive episodes of the Canes Colada, which are only available to the all-access subscribers. You get exclusive newsletters, written articles by me, one-on-one texting access, lockedoncanes.supercast.com. Become an all-access everydayer today. And by the way, later in this episode, we're going to be answering questions from the all-access everydayers, so you don't want to miss that. All right, so standouts and sleepers on the defensive side. I'll start with defensive end. Damon Wilson, he comes in as the standout. This guy is the most proven. Full season of starts under his belt at Mizzou this past year, was a regular with the Georgia Bulldogs for the prior couple of years. Damon Wilson was one of a handful of players who Miami got in the transfer portal who they recruited heavily out of high school. Damon Wilson was one of those. Jarquez Carter, we'll talk about him, was one of those. Jonathan Klein on the offensive line was one of those that Miami didn't win out of high school, but they get him later on in the transfer portal. You know, Damon Wilson comes off of one of the more effective graded seasons in the country last year with a lot of pressures and 9 sacks. So he's going to come in as the standout, expected to be a formidable part of Miami's edge rusher rotation. We presume Damon Wilson is going to start. He's the standout. There are a handful of sleepers on that defensive end rotation, but I think the sleeper of all sleepers is Hayden Lowe, coming off the season-ending knee injury last year. Because Hayden, was watching training camp last season, spring practice prior to that, heading into the 2025 season, and Hayden Lowe was a problem. Like, for even Miami's offensive line, was not always easy to block that dude in practice. Was a former 5-star recruit. So he was at Miami 2025, ready to have his true freshman season and probably be part of that rotation until he suffers a knee injury, like right at the end of training camp. He missed the entire season. But Lowe did get into some of the practices before the playoffs or during the playoffs, and so he's back, or at least well on his way back physically. And Hayden Lowe, based off the high school pedigree, how well he was playing in practice, and how motivated he surely is coming off a season-ending injury, I look at Hayden Lowe as the sleeper of all sleepers in that defensive end room. He's certainly going to compete for a starting job. If I had to predict the starters at this moment, I would say Wilson and Marquise Lightfoot, with Hayden Lowe, Herbert Scroggins, Booker Pickett. Miami's at least 6 deep at defensive end, but Hayden Lowe is somebody I would consider to be the sleeper of all sleepers in that room. Armando Blunt, I don't want to forget about him either. So that's what I look at defensive end. At defensive tackle, I would say you could go with a couple different guys as the standout, either Justin Scott or Ahmad Moten. I'm going to go Ahmad Moten as the standout because he started more games this past year and is certainly going to be a full-time starter. So I think Justin Scott probably the other starter there, but a sleeper definitely is Jarquez Carter, who Miami brings in the transfer portal from Ohio State. Had some meaningful reps this past year as a freshman, but didn't start any games. I think Jarquez Carter, to me, a guy Miami really liked a little over a year ago coming out of high school. They came in second place in his recruitment. They get him the second time around in the transfer portal. I think Carter is definitely going to be a sleeper in that defensive tackle rotation as well. At linebacker, I'm going to definitely say Mohamed Torre is the standout. Torre is back for his 8th year. 8th year, super senior this coming season. And he led Miami in tackles last year. And it wasn't just the tackles. That pass breakup where Mohamed Torre, it looked like 4 concussions on one play, how hard he hit that receiver from Texas A&M to break up that pass and help Miami win that opening round playoff game on the road. That was one of the most spectacular plays of the postseason. And so, yeah, Mohamed Torre, him being back is great. He's going to be the standout and probably the starting inside linebacker. I'm going to say for sleeper in the linebacker room, and we'll talk more about, the rotation, how that's going to look. I think Kellen Wiley Jr., heading into his 2nd year, is the sleeper. He's got the size. He's got the physicality. He practiced really well last year as a true freshman. I think Wiley, even if he doesn't start, is ready to see his role increase this year. And I think Kellen Wiley, to me, is a sleeper and an X factor in that linebacker rotation for Miami. For corner and nickel, I'm going to say Xavier Lucas. I'm going to call him the standout. Obviously, O.J. Frederick might have something to say about that, but I'll go with Xavier Lucas as the standout, probably consistently Miami's best cover corner this past year. And, man, for the sleeper, I'm going to say Omar Thornton, who I probably project to be the starting nickel this coming year, the Boston College transfer who's going to try to fill the shoes of Keontae Scott. I know Miami loves his violence and they love his versatility. And obviously Omar, played on a really bad team last year in Boston College. So it's going to be a big step up when it comes to the development and just the quality of reps he's going to get in practice. So I'm going to go with Omar Thornton as the sleeper there. At safety, Zechariah Poyser, the standout, returning this year. And I'm going to go with the sleeper. I'm going to say Conrad Hussey. He's going to have an opportunity to be probably in the free safety and nickel rotation this coming season. And I'm going to call Conrad a sleeper. And this was another guy, by the way, that Miami recruited heavily out of high school. They ultimately lost his recruitment to Florida State. He had a good freshman year, 2023 at FSU. A lot of players in that FSU team didn't have such a great 2024 season at 2-10. So there was a regression across the board there. He transferred to Oregon State, where it seemed like he played well, but that team was awful. That's like being in football purgatory. So, Conrad Hussey, who was an excellent high school player out of St. Thomas Aquinas, comes here with his stock being pretty low. So Hussey, has an opportunity. We know that the attributes are there, and, can he get developed and unleashed at Miami? Because I mentioned a couple of the names earlier. We didn't have very high expectations for Keontae Scott last year. The Auburn folks kept telling me he's not that great. Jacoby Thomas, the Tennessee fans were like, yeah, he's not that great. And they outplayed their expectations big time. Maybe Conrad Hussey can do the same thing this year. We got a question from one of our Locked On Canes Everydayer Club members, Sherry, who says, hey, Donno, have you heard any feedback on whether Darian Mensah has met with his teammates informally and how that may be going? We all know how important team is, no matter how talented one might be. Thank you kindly. Oh, yeah, the informal meetings have been happening. I mean, it started with his visit down here. He and Cooper Barkate, they went to dinner with some former players, current players like Malachi Toney was photographed there. I think Mark Fletcher has also been involved. And, now Mensah's been on campus. What has it been for almost the past week? I would imagine informal workouts are already happening. It's because, like you said, Sherry, it's very important to get together and build that chemistry. And I know the next time or the first time that I have a chance to talk with Darian is going to be spring football in about a month and a half. And if nobody else asks him, I certainly will. What it's been like getting to know his teammates. I know something that both Carson Beck and Cam Ward did over the last couple of years was invite teammates over to watch the Super Bowl, which is coming up this Sunday. So, Darian, just a free idea. If you're watching this right now, maybe invite your teammates over to watch the big game on Sunday. That might be a good team-building activity if you didn't have that already planned. But that stuff already seems to be going on. I want to give you a couple of extra quotes here from Mensah with his interview with Pete Nakos on On3, because I went over some of those on our Sunday episode yesterday, and what we went over, and if you missed that episode, make sure you check it out. Brad Tejeda was on with me. It was a lot of fun. We talked about Mensah, like breaking down, like his decision to come to Miami. I know the haters will just say it's the money. That's the only answer. But Mensah also talked about, the clear upgrade you get with the team, right? You have a defense that can complement you. Duke didn't have that last year. You expect better pass protection from a Mario Cristobal offensive line versus what they have at Duke. You've got the most talented wide receiver room in the country, top to bottom, I believe. You've got the best running back room in the country, top to bottom. Mensah said that this is going to be the most talented offense he has ever played with, right? Going back from, Pee-wee to high school to the collegiate level of Tulane and Duke. This is going to be the most talented offense. And, he trusts Miami's coaching to develop him and to get him ready for the NFL draft because he saw what happened with Cam Ward in NFL draft 2025. This young man wants to be a number 1 overall pick in 2027. Miami gives him a better chance to get that than Duke. But a couple of other things that Mensah talked about, the whole process for him, right? Because, him leaving Duke, if you hadn't noticed, was a little bit of an unpopular move. If you go by the Duke fans, the Florida State fans were very angry about it. We'll talk about them a little bit later. College football media was like, this is ruining the sport, him doing this. Mensah said, it's been pretty stressful, especially for my mom. I just tried to stay off social media and let my team do all the work, his team being his legal team. I think they did a phenomenal job. He said, my mom was more stressed than anything, so I'm glad it's all done with, and I'm glad it all worked out. And Mensah, this was an interesting question. So he was asked if he has any message to Duke fans. I thought he handled this very well because that message is a trap. Because if you're asked, what do you have to say to the fan base that has basically been calling you the worst human being on planet Earth for the last couple of weeks? Like, nothing you say is going to make them feel any better about him making this decision. So Mensah answered, he says, what would I say to Duke fans? I'll probably just leave that alone. He said, to be honest, they're pretty hostile towards me. No kidding. I'm obviously grateful for all the support I've received during the season. Duke is a special place. I've got nothing but good things to say about that place. It changed my life in the best way possible. Grateful, he said. So, there's only so much you could say, because if he tries to say, hey, Duke fans, you should appreciate that you had me for 1 year, or you should know this is a smaller football program than what I'm going to, nothing you say is going to make them feel any better. So you might as well just move on. They're never going to like you again in Durham. That you could create world peace, and the Duke fans would still hate you. Like, Darian Mensah could end every war and cure every disease tomorrow, and he would still be hated in Durham. So there's nothing he could say or do to make them feel any better. Oh, we have a lot of questions about Miami's coaching staff and rumors about some folks, maybe leaving for NFL jobs. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, this is Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who know, there's more to the score than what's on the screen. You know who moved the game forward at the University of Miami? Jim Larrañaga, most successful basketball coach in Miami history. He was honored about a week ago at Miami. Honestly, we should honor Coach L at every men's basketball game. 13 seasons with the Hurricanes. We had 6 NCAA tournament appearances, which, as we know, historically, it's not always easy to get into the NCAA tournament. 4 trips to the Sweet 16. First ever Elite 8 in 2022, and then a Final 4 in 2023. Jim Larrañaga, we talked about this with Katie Meyer with the women's program. Coach L really enhanced Miami basketball. I'm not going to say he put them on the map. Maybe Leonard Hamilton did that, but he made Miami's dot on the map a lot bigger when it comes to men's basketball, and he made the program so much better than he found it. So here is to Coach L. And it reminds us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's the extra work off the court. It's dialing in every detail. It's giving it the extra fire, the grit, and the I never quit. We put the same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. I am Alex Donno, and make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, and follow me on X at Alex Donno. All right, so we get a question from Steven C., who says, what's Miami's starting linebacker group going to be? What's your prediction? Okay, so my prediction, Mohamed Torre, obviously I feel very confident he's the starting Mike linebacker. So now I think the bigger question is Will linebacker. There's some buzz for Kamal Bonner, who transferred in last year from NC State, had some injury struggles this past season, that it might be his time to step up and start. I'm going to say Kamal Bonner, but I also expect Bobby Pruitt, Kellen Wiley Jr., my sleeper, and of course Chase Smith being back is definitely going to get some prominent spots in the linebacker rotation. So I don't know, it might end up being Torre and Bonner as the starters, but the linebacker rotation, it's going to be really, really important that we're like 4 or 5 deep of contributors at that spot. And, Bobby Pruitt is always a wild card as a playmaker because exciting things seem to happen when he's on the field, whether it's special teams or on defense. So keep your eyes out there. We get a question from Montel who says, hey, Donno, with Todd Monken taking the Cleveland Browns head coaching job, do you think there's any chance that Shannon Dawson goes with him? Mario had mentioned that they were tight, Monken and Dawson, and that's where they got the info on Carson Beck. Yeah, Todd Monken put in a big recommendation for Beck last year. He says, I'm hoping not, because I'm pretty sure that would mean the portal would reopen for our players. Well, no, it wouldn't. The portal only reopens when you lose a head coach, not a coordinator. And also, Dawson's not going to Cleveland, right? So I've been following their coaching staff. They've already hired their OC, it's Travis Switzer. And they've also already hired their quarterbacks coach in Mike Bajakian, who was recently the OC and quarterback coach at UMass. So it doesn't seem like they have any spot for Dawson. I know, and I know that there were some times where Dawson has been linked to like possible college jobs and pro jobs, but it seems like that's not going to happen. But we have other questions about the staff. Grace wants to know, hey, realistically, are we losing Jason Taylor or Will Harris to the NFL? At the 904, they want to know, can you update the coaching staff or any changes? So, yeah, there's been, we talked about this a little bit yesterday with Brad Tejeda. There's been some rumors out there. Jason Taylor has been linked to possibly joining the Jets staff, or his son plays, and Jason played briefly for the Jets or the Bills. I've done a lot of searching on that for the last day or two, and there are not like any concrete links of JT actually interviewing or being named a candidate for any of these NFL openings, but the rumor mill is still out there, so I'm not going to completely dismiss it. I'll say what I've been saying for the past 3 years, that if there's ever contact between Jason and the Miami Dolphins, that would get me worried. Because JT loves living in South Florida. It's where his roots are now. I mean, I know he's originally from Pittsburgh, but his roots are now in Miami. This is where he enjoys living, and family and everything being here. So I think if the Miami Dolphins, who to this point have been too dumb to hire him, if they ever come to their senses, that would be the one that I really worry about. But we'll be tracking him. And then Will Harris, this is the second straight year there's been NFL rumors. Again, I haven't been able to find any concrete links to him yet this offseason. So I guess these are just two that we're going to be monitoring. The only coach that Miami has lost so far, which, I think they can probably find an upgrade out there, is tight ends coach Cody Woodall. Went back to his home state of Mississippi to coach on the Ole Miss staff. I think we'll get a better idea in the next week or two who the targets are going to be there. But I'm pretty confident Miami's going to find a tight ends coach that's going to be, a top recruiter, and then maybe even someone who becomes like a future potential offensive coordinator, if, the next couple of years, if Shannon Dawson does get a promotion somewhere else. We get a question from Will304 who says, do you know the top targets for Miami in the 2027 recruiting class? Yeah, let me give you some of those. Top wide receiver, 5-star Nick Lanier. He is I think he's a must-get, and Lanier has gotten multiple predictions to land at Miami. Miami's really focused on Carroll City superstar, former Miami Northwestern Nick Lanier, and this to me, this is a great skill position player. You don't want to let this guy leave town, so I think he's a real focus. Top offensive tackle, Mark Matthews out of St. Thomas Aquinas, 5-star top tackle in the class. He is a priority. Quarterback has been an interesting one. You know, Miami was after Trent Seaborn, committed to Alabama. I don't think Miami's given up on Seaborn. Neiman Lawrence from American Heritage appears to be one of the top targets there. Miami does not have a 2027 quarterback yet. And I saw a Gabby Urrutia post from a couple days ago. Corey Heatherman, Miami's DC, made a visit to 5-star cornerback Joshua Dobson out of Huff High School in North Carolina, second-ranked corner in the class of 2027. Everybody wants that dude, but I think Miami is going to get themselves right in the thick of it for him. Folks, I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're going to have more episodes today. We're going to have like 50 episodes this week. I might have exaggerated that a little bit, but we are going to talk some basketball later today with Hoodie Girl, because I'm a little concerned. You know, Miami has had a couple of bad home losses over the past couple of weeks. It was Cal this past weekend, 86-85. Miami had a shocking home loss against Florida State the previous week. Jay Lucas's team is having a fine season, but the resume has them on the bubble. So I want to get the sense of where this basketball team is going. And we're also later today going to talk with a legend who really needs no introduction, but Danny Boy Kane is going to join us later on today. You probably know him from social media or from his own podcasting or from Barstool. Danny Boy Kane is going to join us for an evening episode today. So thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We'll talk to you next time on another episode right here on the awesome #1 Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.